The CIA thinks the Russian government interfered with the U.S. election to help.
It's clear that Russia is enjoying this, even relishing it.
Russia interfered in the U.S. election to help Donald Trump win.
They have no idea if it's Russia or China. It could be somebody sitting in a bed someplace.
Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. Here are some of the media stories we're covering this week. Did Russia interfere with the American election? The facts remain under wraps, but the media aren't waiting for them to tell the story. India, a country with more than 100 television news channels. But when the Prime Minister wants to speak directly to voters, he does it on radio. Why? Goodbye from a city under siege. Civilians and journalists alike send out what could be their final messages from Aleppo. And a weather channel takes on a news source over climate change and the facts.
Try consulting a scientist first.
Washington is a month away from Inauguration Day, and while millions of Americans are looking inwards, asking how the election of Donald Trump could happen, much of the U.S. mainstream news media is looking outside for answers at Moscow. Talk of Russian hacking of Democratic Party emails jumped back into the headlines December 9th, when on the same day that President Obama ordered a full review of the available evidence by all 17 U.S. intelligence agencies, the Washington Post reported that one of those agencies, the CIA, was already more certain than the others, pointing the finger at the Kremlin. But what stuck out about the Post's story was that there was no indication that it was based on information from a CIA source. The newspaper said it spoke to a, quote, senior U.S. official, which could mean there were members of Congress, probably Democrats. But that little detail did not stop the talking heads, pundits, and columnists from treating an allegation from an anonymous source as fact, leading one top opinion writer at America's unofficial newspaper of record, the New York Times, to call the election tainted, the result illegitimate. The reporting of intelligence leaks, again, anonymously sourced, helped take the U.S. to war once in Iraq. And with all this talk of breached firewalls and enemies at the gates, one has to wonder where this story is going. Our starting point this week is 1301 K Street in Washington, the newsroom of the Washington Post.
Hi, I'm Libby Casey in the Washington Post newsroom, and I'm here with Greg Miller, national security correspondent. Greg, take us through what we know.
So what we know is that the CIA has reached this determination with high confidence that it believes Russia had a preferred candidate, was backing that candidate, and that that candidate was Donald Trump.
The allegation that Russia or Russian hackers had meddled in the U.S. elections.
The Clinton campaign certainly believes that their connection to the Russian government.
By stealing emails of senior Clinton campaign officials and making them public through WikiLeaks is not new.
The Washington Post's blockbuster report
But the Post's story went further than that, saying the CIA has since concluded that Russia wasn't out to meddle or simply disrupt the election. It wanted Donald Trump to win.
specifically to try to hand the presidency to Donald Trump.
It revealed for the first time that the CIA had changed its assessment of why Russia did in fact hack the election, and that they now believe it was because Russia affirmatively wanted Trump to be president, as distinct from trying to just undermine confidence generally.
It's interesting to see how there's already been this very kind of dogmatic partisan divide where some Republican politicians are actually opposing the CIA.
Intelligence has been politicized in the Obama administration to a very significant degree.
Claiming that Russia had nothing to do with potential election hacking, whereas many Democrats are jumping on board.
You're carrying water for the Kremlin.
I'm not carrying water for the... You're making...
One of the first rules of journalism, whether you're a practitioner of the craft or a consumer of the end product, is to consider the source. Sometimes that requires some reading between the lines. That's the case with this story, which reportedly started with a CIA assessment and appears to have made it to the pages of the Washington Post via a political middleman or woman.
The story is based on the information from a senior U.S. government official. This person, according to the article, did not see the briefing or the assessment. He or she is only relaying information provided to him or her by someone else who saw the assessment. The readers have to be careful then to understand that this information is being filtered now by two different groups. One is the person relaying the information, the other is the Washington Post, which is writing it out.
Well, on one level, you know, kudos to the Post for having these sources. The story was attributed to senior U.S. government officials. A lot of people thought that it was CIA sources, but it's quite likely, I think, that Senate sources, Democratic Senate sources, were the ones behind the story.
And I think we should be very skeptical. Even the U.S. intelligence community is divided on this. The multiple officials in the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, which is the head of the U.S. intelligence community, told Reuters that they're not entirely on board with the CIA's claims. They said that, yes, Russia may have been involved in potential hacking, but they can't prove that the Russia's intent was supposedly to help Donald Trump win the election.
This is material that's being gathered by U.S. intelligence agencies, including the CIA. It's classified. We, of course, would prefer to lay it all out for readers on our website with links to actual documents or whatever and be able to name these officials, but that's just not how national security reporting in this realm works. And trust me, I've gotten lots of emails, lots of feedback on social media. Where's the evidence here? You guys are basing all of this on anonymous sources. I don't believe it until you can show me the proof. And that's just not how this works.
American news consumers, though, are in a suspicious mood. Having weathered an epidemic of fake campaign news, they're bringing a new degree of scrutiny to mainstream news sources like the Post as well. The other historical factor feeding into the skepticism machine goes back a decade and a half, the run-up to the Iraq War. Again, consider the source. Those stories about Saddam Hussein's WMDs and his links to al-Qaeda, both of which proved non-existent, most came from intelligence agencies like the CIA and were spread to Americans through multiple news outlets, the Washington Post among them. Journalism that often lacked nuance and the necessary diligence.
And this is one of the things that got us in trouble with reports about weapons of mass destruction. The reports by the intelligence community were actually very nuanced and complete, but when they were leaked and then subsequently interpreted, people were drawing conclusions that they shouldn't have. This is the concern that one has to have in reading the Washington Post article.
There is a confusion now, and to me sometimes it appears a willful confusion on the part of a large segment of the public. They try to mix what established, respected news organization like the Washington Post, which has been in business for a century and which has a reputation for authoritative, accurate reporting, with what really is fake news.
There really hasn't been a lot of attention on the role in which secrecy feeds that, and the role in which the government can make claims and hide behind anonymity. That, I think, feeds a discrediting of the news process that makes people more susceptible to fake news and conspiracy theories.
On conspiracies, one final point. Iran, 1953. Guatemala, 1954. Chile, 1973. Venezuela, 2002. All had democratically elected governments overthrown in coups either organized or backed by the US. The CIA played a part in all of them. And in 1996, there was Russia. US political operatives openly took credit for stage managing the election of Boris Yeltsin. Time magazine made that its cover story. Sending a few American spin doctors to Moscow is not the same as Russians hacking computers based in Washington, but still.
When you look at the history of the CIA's foreign meddling, not just today, but over decades of overthrowing and attempting to overthrow democratically elected governments throughout the world, I mean, the U.S. does not have any leg to stand on. The hypocrisy of this is mind-blowing.
Other media stories that are on our radar this week: among the estimated 50,000 civilians trapped on the eastern side of Aleppo are journalists, and they are asking for help as government and Russian forces close in on the last of the rebel-held areas there. Wa'ad Al-Katayeb is a local who has been reporting for Britain's Channel 4 for the past year. She is expecting her second child and has reportedly taken shelter along with her husband, daughter, and some medical workers. In a message to her foreign editor, she said, "I still have hope. but we feel no one is listening or doing anything to save us. Remember your humanity. If you are listening, please help.
This might be close to, if not the last communication.
On December 12th, Bidal Abdul Karim, an American journalist with the on-the-ground news website, also posted from eastern Aleppo in what he called perhaps his final message via Twitter. For years, Syria has been one of the world's most dangerous places to be a journalist. And earlier this week, British reporter John Cantley, taken hostage by ISIL in Syria back in 2012, appeared in the organization's latest propaganda video from Iraq. 5 years after Rupert Murdoch was forced to, as the papers put it, abandon his bid to take control of Britain's biggest private broadcaster, Sky Television, the media mogul has decided that the time is right to get that deal back on track.
This is the most humble day of my life.
Murdoch was at his most contrite when the phone hacking scandal at his now defunct News of the World tabloid led to a judicial inquiry, and he put his Sky takeover plans on the back burner. One of his companies, 21st Century Fox, already owns 39% of Sky and has now bid $11.2 billion for the remaining shares. One thing that has not changed is the concern that Murdoch, who already controls 40% of the British newspaper market, would own too much of the UK media space if the British government allows the Sky deal to go through. The minister responsible, Culture Secretary Karen Bradley, is under pressure from members of all three parties, including the ruling Conservatives, to refer the proposed bid to the British media regulator, Ofcom, for review. The president of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte, has made his dislike for those involved in the Philippine drug trade abundantly clear. But now those reporting on his anti-drug campaign are also in his sights. Earlier this week, his office criticized the New York Times for an article and photo essay published December 7th entitled "They Are Slaughtering Us Like Animals," documenting Duterte's anti-drug campaign. Australian photojournalist Daniel Berahulak spent 5 weeks in the country, photographing 57 people killed for their alleged involvement in drugs. Duterte took office 6 months ago and has vowed to kill anyone involved in the drug trade, including addicts, outraging human rights groups and some foreign governments. More than 3,500 alleged drug dealers and abusers have been murdered since, some in police operations, the majority, though, by vigilante militias. Many blame the president for the extrajudicial killings, which the government has denied. On the Times piece, Duterte's office called it totally one-sided, said that it depicts the Philippines as the wild, wild west in this part of the world. This is farthest from the truth. The Times' international editor defended his story. Daniel's work was an important contribution to our ongoing and in-depth coverage of the Philippines. He took us onto the streets in a visceral, human way, capturing the cold reality of state policy. When we've examined the media landscape in India, we've tended to focus on television news channels. The country has more than 100 of them. This week, though, we're looking at radio and the way it's being used by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The state-owned network, All India Radio, is one of the world's largest. It reaches more than 98% of the country's 1.3 billion people. Once a month, Modi takes the mic. The show's title, Mann Ki Baat, loosely translates to heart to heart. This is an old model. U.S. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt was doing his fireside chats on radio way back in the 1930s. But this is the first time that an Indian prime minister has chosen to speak to the nation regularly in this way. Narendra Modi came to power 2 years ago packing lots of political baggage, and some of his policies have divided Indians. The fact that he's a good media performer helps. However, his most recent move to declare more than 80% of the Indian banknotes in circulation illegal to combat what's been called black money has been very difficult for him to spin, because a good deal of financial chaos ensued. So Modi took to the airwaves and made that issue the subject of his latest program. The Listening Post's Meenakshi Ravi now on the traditional radio broadcast that Modi is using as a workaround, taking him straight to the people.
आकाशवाणी का ये दिल्ली केंद्र है। कृपया हमारे अगले कार्यक्रम की प्रतीक्षा कीजिए। ये आकाशवाणी है।
His media strategy is said to have changed Indian politics. But when Narendra Modi decided to start a monthly broadcast from the Prime Minister's office,
मेरे प्यारे देशवासियों,
he went surprisingly old school.
मैं आज रेडियो के माध्यम से आपसे कुछ मन की बातें बताना चाहता हूँ.
Television's reach is even today, in 2016, just 1/6 of where the radio reaches. Radio reaches about 98 point a few percent in the country. Forget about the big cities and metropolitan towns. Go to the countryside, there is television, but there would be more radio.
But I think also this is another reason why Modi has chosen this medium, which is that radio is a much more intimate media than television.
कभी-कभी ऐसा सोचते हैं, छोड़ो यार, लोग बेकार हैं, लोगों को कुछ करना नहीं है, हमारा देश ही ऐसा है। आज मैं कहता हूँ, ये सोच बदलना बहुत जरूरी है।
Modi does give the impression that he is speaking to them almost individually. And of course, for millions and millions of Indians who are just used to politicians coming occasionally at time of elections, making promises and walking away again and never being seen again, here is this Prime Minister who appears to be talking to them individually.
एक तरफ परीक्षा की चिंता और दूसरी तरफ वर्ल्ड कप। खैर दोस्तों, आपकी मुसीबत के समय मैं आपके साथ आया हूँ और मैं आपको कोई उपदेश देने नहीं आया हूँ, ऐसे ही हल्की फुल्की बातें करने आया हूँ।
Previous prime ministers used to take the traditional route of communicating with the people, which is by traditional media via official dump, but there's never been this regular monthly radio address to the nation. It is absolutely a one of a kind.
For the state-run All India Radio Network, Mann Ki Baat has been more than just a programming perk from Modi. It has also boosted ad revenue. The standard rate for 10 seconds of ad time is $22. But during the Mann Ki Baat programming slot, the price jumps to $3,000. Modi and his media strategy team aren't relying just on All India Radio's infrastructure to get the message out. Mann Ki Baat broadcasts are relayed on the state TV network, Doordarshan, and are available to private radio and TV channels, many of whom simulcast the address.
प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी आज अब से कुछ देर बाद एक बार फिर से मन की बात कर रहे हैं।
आज है रविवार का दिन और प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी कर रहे हैं मन की बात।
And in a country that ranks second in the world for mobile phone use, the government has developed a Narendra Modi app that allows users to listen to episodes of Mann Ki Baat on demand in any Indian language of their choice. Listeners can also ring a number that will call them back and replay the latest broadcast. Figures from August this year show the phone service processing 2 million calls a month. For Modi, who has been notorious for avoiding the Indian news media, Mann Ki Baat is an extension of his policy of, quote, direct engagement with the people.
He wants to bypass the press. So he is having a direct communication with the people of India. And he has not chosen the interview mode because he is not trusting the press. Don't forget, he is not trying to connect with the urban masses. I don't need the English press, they don't control the votes. I need to communicate with the Hindi and the regional masses. I will communicate with them.
Prime Minister Modi has this very sophisticated 360-degree direct to the people media strategy. So Mann Ki Baat fits into that beautifully. The moment the Prime Minister announces the date for a forthcoming Mann Ki Baat, immediately All India Radio, mygov.in, they start soliciting suggestions from the people. So you can post a message on mygov.in or in Narendra Modi app.
एक श्रीमान गणेश वेंकरादरी, मुंबई के सज्जन, उन्होंने मुझे मेल भेजा।
This is all part of the impression of communicating with the public. But basically the important thing really is the monologue which Modi gives. So you have to remember about Modi that he is a one-man band. Nobody else counts. And therefore as a one-man band, he is the only person who really speaks for the government, and he is the only person who's heard.
To be heard across the country every month in a format he can control, access to huge audiences without questions from pesky reporters has unquestionably been a media masterstroke for Modi. You could say he's just won half the battle though. The second challenge involves persuading those who are listening.
अपनी बात जनता को बताते और वो फायदे की बताते।
भाई कहने को तो वो कुछ कह रहे लेकिन ऐसा हो तो कुछ नहीं रहा।
क्यों जब पत्रकारों से बात क्यों नहीं करते वो? करनी चाहिए उनसे भी।
Modi has never made a secret of his suspicion of the Indian media. There are over 100 news channels in the country, and often the ones getting the big ratings are those putting out high-decibel, sensationalized reporting. Earlier this month, Modi delivered his take on the Indian media.
कल तो मैं देख रहा था इसी टीवी पे लोग पहली तारीख थी तो कतार में खड़े थे परसों, तो सुबह सुबह पहुंच गए और पूछ रहे थे और सवाल भी ऐसे पूछते थे उनको गुस्सा लाने के लिए।
Modi was referring to media reports on his ambitious campaign of what's called demonetization, where high-value currency notes have been scrapped to prevent counterfeiting and money laundering. For more than a month, Indians of all classes have had to struggle with a radically changed monetary landscape, and Modi and his government have been battling negative press.
इस बार जब मैंने मन की बात के लिए लोगों के सुझाव मांगे, तो मैं कह सकता हूं एक तरफा ही सबके सुझाव आए। सब कहते थे कि 500 और 1000 वाली नोटों पर और विस्तार से बातें करें।
On 26th, the issue of counterfeit currency did not appear. So one point on the basis of which he went for demonetization is taken out. Funding for terrorists finds one or two mentions. Black money also finds lesser number of mentions. What replaces it? It is replaced with cashless economy. A new phrase.
लेकिन आज देश जिस महान कार्य को करना चाहता है, हमारा सपना है कैशलेस सोसाइटी। ये ठीक है कि 100% कैशलेस सोसाइटी संभव नहीं होती है, लेकिन क्यों न भारत लेस कैश सोसाइटी की तो शुरुआत करें।
Now the question is, has he explained to the people why we want to go to cashless society? And what happened to his earlier talk about going away with black money? So this time I don't think he did connect with a lot of people. Because demonetization has thrown everybody's life out of gear. And this Man Ki Baat, I don't think had much resonance with a lot of people.
Following Modi's latest broadcast, the spokesman for India's main opposition party said Man Ki Baat should be pulled off the air. The words spoken by the Prime Minister were hollow. That assessment is subjective. It depends on an individual's political leaning. What is undisputable is that in his campaign to build a direct contact with his voter base and circumvent the media, Narendra Modi has gone where no other Indian Prime Minister has ventured. And it doesn't matter that everyone isn't convinced by him all the time. Modi gets uninterrupted airtime with a huge segment of the Indian public. And in the world's largest democracy, that is invaluable.
And finally, here at the Listening Post, we've talked a lot about the rise of so-called alt-right media in the U.S., specifically Breitbart News, after the appointment of its former chairman, Steve Bannon, as Donald Trump's chief strategist. Last week, the Weather Channel made news when a meteorologist there, Kate Parker, went after Breitbart for an article that the site published, which used one of the Weather Channel's videos to cast doubt on the science of climate change. As Parker put it, cherry-picking and twisting the facts will not change the future, nor the fact, note fact, not opinion, that the Earth is warming. Breitbart's editor-in-chief stressed in a statement that the Weather Channel video embedded alongside its story was auto-generated by a third-party vendor, and said that the Weather Channel should chill out. So Breitbart isn't just a climate change denier, the site even denies responsibility for what it publishes. We'll see you next time here at the Listening Post.
So last week, Breitbart.com published an article claiming that global warming was nothing but a scare and global temperatures were actually falling. Problem is, they used a completely unrelated video about La Nina with my face in it to attempt to back their point. Now, what's worse is that the U.S. Committee on Space, Science and Technology actually tweeted it out. Here's the thing. Science doesn't care about your opinion. Cherry picking and twisting the facts will not change the future, nor the fact, note fact, not opinion, that the Earth is warming. So let's break it down. Their first claim is that global land temperatures have plummeted by 1 degree Celsius since the middle of this year, the biggest and steepest fall on record. Now, that was based on one satellite estimate of global land temperatures. Land temperatures aren't an appropriate measure. The Earth is 70% water, and water is where we store most of our heat energy. So when you look at sea surface temperatures and you combine that with land temperatures, you actually get a record high for November of 2016. Their second claim, it can be argued that without El Nino, 2014 to 2016 would not have been record warm years. When you actually take out the El Nino spike in temperatures, 2015 and 2016 still come in as the warmest years on record. So next time you're thinking about publishing a cherry-picked article, try consulting a scientist first. And to all my fellow scientists out there, let's make the facts louder than the opinions.